Hello, climbers, and welcome to Season 3 of Climbing Mount CMMC. Hello, climbers, and welcome back to another episode of Climbing Mount CMMC, the podcast. I believe this will be our last episode of Season 3. It has been a wonderful ride, but now we will prepare for Season 4.
Everything must come to an end.
Yes. And I am super excited, though, for what is to come. But today, we are talking about the questions that I have received from contractors recently. Now, many people talk about how it's going to affect contractors and what CMMC requirements are going to be needed, what time frames and whatnot. But what I want to talk about today specifically is the questions that I have literally received from those contractors.
Stories from the trenches.
Stories right from them, and things that we have seen. And the reason that I want to do that is because it's real life, right? It's real life. We're here. We all want to actually know the answers to things. So I want to just break this down and have Bobby kind of commentate as well with his boots on the ground perspective of it too, going through boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
Because he's walking through clients through this right now, even of ours. I mean, many people are walking through CMMC Level 2 climbs as we speak. So let's talk about the first question that I get the most, which is, how do I know if I need CMMC Level 1 or CMMC Level 2? Now, hey, this is a great question because CMMC Level 1 is much easier than CMMC Level 2, right? So how exactly, Bobby, do you want to speak to, kind of how they can tell in their contracts right now, but also to be prepared for the future because things might look a little bit different in the contracts moving forward too?
Yeah, because if you thought, well, if I have DFAR 7012 requirements or 7008 in any of my existing contracts, therefore I know I'm going to have to be required to be Level 2.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily true. So let's break that down for just a second. So if you have 7012 and 7008 requirements, you should have already had a Level 2 environment to receive those contracts. So let's pretend that didn't exist, right? Let's pretend for a second that didn't exist.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the future moving forward, right? Because that's what they're caring about. In that situation, I think that's where getting a really good attorney and having them look over that type of data that you have is great because they provide client attorney privilege, right? Which is nice. They provide, protection if they told you advice incorrectly.
Yeah.
So you can look at the contracts that you have, because if you can really help get good definition of understanding, it really accomplishes two very, very important goals. First off, it helps provide clarity of what type of data you have that you need to protect. That is probably one of the biggest challenges when we go to come in with a client. We're like, okay, you want us to support you. Good. Okay, we're going to help you get your Level 2. And they're like, do we need Level 2? I'm like, well, that's what you hired us to do, but okay, like what type of data do you have? Do I have data? And you're like, oh my gosh, okay, this is brilliant.
That's really
Those are the types of things that we run into on a regular basis as we're working with potential clients or clients that we've had, is just trying to help identify that. So get an attorney that's their job. That's what they know and they understand. And they can look over the contracts. They can look at the specific DFARs. They can look further down in the DFAR clause requirements. It may be that they look at those contracts and say, well, they slapped it on and it's not appropriate. Yeah. Here's the recourses you can do if in your future contracts they try to do that you can perhaps remediate this. Maybe you can't. Maybe the contract, the attorney looks at that and goes, you know what? I think you probably shouldn't have this, but it might be safer or smarter for you to go ahead and have a Level 2 environment so that if you do get exposed to these, you're not, stuck in a rock and a hard place, because you can't just magically materialize an environment that's ready to receive CY. You're looking at 8 months to a year's time frame to have an appropriate environment to do that. Yeah. So, there has to be a little bit of reading the tea leaves there, right?
Yes.
So, and that's a big part.
And we're talking about Level 1 is FCI, right?
Right.
And level 2 is CUI. And so you need to be able to identify what you have in your environment. I will have linked in the description too. I just want to shout out Ryan Bonner actually does a really cool talk
He's the
about
best human being for that. He's
getting
so good.
CUI out of there. And it's not really like you can just remove it, like, haha, I don't have it anymore. But really, it's identifying these things, kind
Mhm.
of like what we're talking about here. So it's so critical if you haven't had that discussion to know, because you
Mhm.
also don't want to die by assumicide, is what I like to say. And you assume
That's a
that you
tough way to go.
have, yeah, you assume that you only have, like what Bobby's saying, level 1 requirements and FCI, and all you handle is SCI, and that's all you're going to be doing moving forward with the ones that you might potentially be bidding on in the future, which be careful about that as well. And then you come time for award, contract award, and they're like, I need to see your level 2 certification.
Mhm.
And
But
that is bad.
let's look at it also another side. It's like sometimes the clients just sort of put their brain on the shelf and go, I don't know what to do. You know, you're like, come
Mhm,
on, let's think through this. Let's get a little
mhm,
let's get a little logical. And here's what I mean by that. You might be like, okay, well, I'm a construction company. How would I ever be looped into having level 2 requirements? And you're like, okay, what are you doing work on? Well, we're doing it on a military base. You are.
oh,
Yeah. Okay. So what do they send you in order for you to know where you're going to build at? Well, the plans. Plans for the base. And they're like, yeah. So can you post that publicly? Well, heck no. I'm like, so it's controlled information. Well, yeah, it would. Oh, yeah. I see
oh.
where you're going with that. You're like, yeah, it's controlled and classified information. So, of course, yeah, yeah, you're in construction, but they're giving you that material. So,
Mhm,
yeah, it's going to be CUI, which means you're going to need level 2.
right.
You know, so when you start looking at the type of data that they're giving you, sometimes you can just use logic to kind of move your way through understanding whether or not, even though it may not necessarily be so clear, you can just go, okay, well, logically, as I'm looking at this, obviously, this is going to be something that I need to go ahead and start preparing for in getting a level 2 assessment. Even though you may have had for years 7008 and 7012 DFAR requirements already in your contracts that you've been accepting, we're just going to pretend that didn't happen for the moment. But so many companies have done that and have been doing that. I mean, I don't think there isn't an organization that hasn't reached out that we have started working with that didn't have those contracts already,
Yes,
and they're
that's
working with us, right?
right.
So they're all in it. They've all been rubbing all in it and rolling in it, and they're showing up going, yeah, how do we get this cleaned off and fixed? You know, and you're like, well, come on in. Let's see how we can help you.
Another question that I get a lot, which is really interesting. This is to a specific party that has actually already prepared for CMMC Level 1. We have some people that are coming to us that have already prepared their environment and have been self-assessing
Hmm.
as CMMC Level 1. Great. Okay, that's awesome. And they ask, okay, but what does CMMC Level 2 bring? and and I think it's just really important to start with the basics here of level 1 includes 15 of the controls from NIST 800 171, whereas CMMC level 2 is 110.
Right.
Okay, so let's do the math on the amount of controls that you are adding to your environment. Another thing that is a slap in the face that I really do want to emphasize if you don't know this already. When you are self-assessing with level 1, if you're needing a certification for level 2, you do not self-assess that, okay? Unless you are in the small party that is
Right.
allowed. It's small, okay, small party for
Right.
CMMC level 2 self-assessments,
And
okay?
everybody believes they're part of that small party, but they're
Everybody
not.
likes to be a part of that party. Yeah, and not many are going to be. CMMC level 2 certifications are done by a third-party assessment organization, not you. I know it'd be more fun if it was if it was done by you and only you, but no. These people, these assessors, they are certified. They break that, they tear apart your documentation. Phase 1, they go through your system security plan, your customer responsibility matrix. They look at all of your stuff. Phase 2, they ask you questions and they want to see how it's done. This is no joke. This should not be
Mm.
taken lightly. And some people have taken it lightly or maybe didn't realize how unprepared they were until they got there. have
And
talked to multiple people that have failed a CMMC Level 2 certification. It is possible, very, very possible to
well,
fail.
but I don't think I've ever seen anyone that has said, "Oh yeah, I think we're pretty good level 1," that I've ever looked at that they were right about it. Like, and it all goes back to that whole friend, right? That comes to you for advice, and you're like, "Dude, this is so freaking obvious," and they're like, "I don't know," blah 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 blah, and they don't see it, right? They don't see the obviousness of it because from their perspective, everything's great, and you're
Yeah.
like, "Come on, man." That's a nail
Yeah.
in your head. That's the reason why you have a migraine. Just pull it out. You know,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
put it back in. And
Don't put it back
and
in.
and so you have that, right? And it's very obvious from the outside. So you have this information bias, and it's just it plays out so bad for most people when they're going through because they want to do it fast. So they have this information bias and opinion. Okay, this is good, right? Yeah, this is the answer I want to hear. So yeah, everything's fine,
Hmm.
even though it's really not. And
Yeah.
just the bad thing is then you take that into your level 2, and then it goes horribly wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I really do think it is critical to understand for those of you who might be listening to this who are I think I'm talking to two parties at the same time. One, the contractors themselves that are
Mm-hmm.
going into this, but also the MSPs that are like us that might be listening to this that think they have their client ready for level 1 or level 2. Especially if you think you have your client ready for level 2, please, please hear what we're saying about this stuff. Because it is no joke. And
And,
we,
and and here's some smart things you can do. You can have a mock assessment from a C3PO, and you can go to, and some of them will let you do this. You say, hey, can we maybe just take a look at 3 controls? We're going to give you our SSP and some of those types of things. These organizations are so used to looking at this based on the quality of the material they're looking at. They can very quickly go, this isn't going to go well. And they can tell you, boom, just like that. And you don't have to go through a full audit. You don't have to pay the money for a full 4-day review. You can just do a small condensed review and get a very quick snapshot analysis of how you might fare and do, some difficult controls. Like you could maybe look at change management. You could look at, ACs. Some of those spider web out so far, it's kind of hard to kind of keep them, their scope limited for assessment pieces. But it'll do some really important things of giving you an idea of what it looks and feels like to have an audit. You could do it for much cheaper and get a good idea metric-wise of where you're at.
yeah, absolutely. Would highly recommend that.
Especially if you have a third party involved. Like if you have another MSP involved with you, yeah, I would not go swinging for a full level 2 and not have even gotten a general idea of how it's going to go.
Yes, especially if that MSP is not CMMC Level 2
Yep.
certified themselves, right? Because that
Yeah.
means that they haven't gone through an
Done
assessment. Or well, honestly, I'd be very surprised if they're not CMMC Level 2 certified, but they've gone through multiple CMMC Level 2 assessments by now. I feel like that has to be a one person party that's in that category. Um, Okay, next one that I want to talk about is I've gotten the question a lot of times. I'll talk to contractors, but I'll talk to the person who is tasked to implement CMMC in that organization. Okay, so leadership has brought on this person who is tech savvy and whatnot to implement CMMC for their entire organization. And that person asked me, how do I convince my leadership to get on board with this? So, what would you say, Bobby? I'm curious at first, just from you as leadership for that has gone through CMMC Level 2. What would you say to that person?
Well, the first question I would ask is like, what percentage of your business? I would just go C-suite based and say like, what percentage of your business constitutes DoD or government based work? And if they're like 80%, 50%, like what are we talking about here? Like, if you have those types of relationships where a majority or a good chunk of your business is related to these government contracts, how could you not have leadership buy-in to understand that you have to build an environment to foster it?
Yeah.
You have to have. I mean, just like when you're your first kid, you have to nest and build this environment that's safe to receive this child, right? So you're thinking about that's why you have baby showers because you go out and get all of this stuff that you need
Did
to
you
do so
cover
that
up
when you
outlets when you had
yeah, cover up
incidents like
outlets.
that?
Yeah, put those little corner things on your fireplace if you have them, so your kid doesn't crack their skull open and go to the emergency room. My,
Yeah.
now, when I was a kid, they just gave us a grenade and said, "We'll see."
Yeah. Yeah. You
Natural
safeguarded me a little bit
selection,
more.
take your course. So I mean, that was, but it's like, but in leadership, they have to understand that you have to have an environment that's ready to receive the CUI baby
Yeah.
and be able to have that in your environment. And
Mm-hmm.
so it just that is really the concept that you have to really drive to that. And your environment is, there's not an environment that I have ever seen on the planet in 20 plus years that I've ever walked into that is even close, remotely close to adequate ever. So if you think you're that unicorn, let me just tell you, you're not. So just know you don't have it, and it's going to take some time and money to get there. And if you want to lose that business, then just mess around and find out.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't, and you want to stay in business, you need to start planning for the future, and that is building that environment now.
Yeah. Mess around and find out. Yeah, it's the PG version of saying that. I like it. Okay, another question that I have gotten before is, how do I get a PoAM? Okay, and I want to set the stage a little bit, right? So if you are a subcontractor that works under a prime, I have heard of some subcontractors that are telling their primes that they're getting ready for CMMC Level 2. Now, what does that mean exactly for some of them? They're talking to us. So does that give some context on how much they've gotten ready for CMMC Level 2? Okay,
Right,
I
right.
digress. But they're getting ready for CMMC Level 2, and they tell their primes that, and the primes come back and they say they want to see their PoAM. Now
That's a
they ask
genius
me,
question. It is I mean, it's
good
so
job.
good. Keep
Good
going.
job, primes. Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent job
It
for
is a
asking.
really smart way of asking.
Yeah. So,
Have you been
Bobby,
doing your homework?
how do you get a prime? How do you give a
Well,
prime contractor a PoAM?
it's a, you know, there's lots of different ways the primes can try to crack this egg. And the egg they're trying to crack here is like, have these people that have been at a 50 SPRS score, in other words, they're not at a perfect 110, have they been doing their homework and actually trying to move the needle to be really ready? Or have they been lying their butts off? And, if you think about it, like, what critical document could you ask them to give you that would give you an indication of whether that's the case? And they've just basically perfectly described the PoAM.
Yes.
And for those that may not know what it stands for Plan of Action and Milestones. And the way that it was supposed to happen is that when self-respecting contractors said, hey, I'm going to be working on this and I'm going to be slowly over time moving the needle to get ready for CMMC and getting a 110, we're going to set some goals. And we're going to say that over this time frame, we're going to get change management implemented. We're going to go ahead and do the separation of duties. We're going to set up application allow listing. We're going to have vulnerability management and review. We're going to set up all of these things. We're going to have all the policies and documents. And you set specific timeframes on when those are going to happen. That's how you describe and build out your PoAM. So in a good, healthy environment, you should start seeing that number change because someone's been authorized and given the power to make that change happen inside your organization. So over the course of 6 months to a year and a half, 2 years, your score should go from 50 to 70 to 85 to 90. Those last few can be really difficult to hit, but then you finally get to the 110 and everybody gives each other a high five. But if that PoAM is like, written in crayon and it hasn't changed since 1962, they know you've been lying. And so they know right away. So it's just a really great way for the primes to kind of really stare down the subs to get a general idea if they've been phoning it in or not.
Yes.
It's pretty obvious
When you see the PoAM.
when you see the PoAM. Additionally, it creates a situation where they literally could lie. Right? So I'm going to create, they're just like, okay, let's give you all this rope here. Now, do you want to take that rope and make a perfect PoAM, or do you want to lasso it around your neck, throw it over a tree, tie it to your bumper, and hit the gas?
Yeah.
Like, because If you're sitting there lying your pants off about how you're really doing this because you lied your pants off when you did your SPRS score back in the day, you're just building dirt on top of your
Yeah.
grave,
Yeah.
so don't mess around with that. You got to be accurate.
I do want
That's what they're
to,
looking at. That's why
yes.
they're looking for that.
Yes, and I do want to clarify one thing, which we are going to do another episode, which it might already be out depending on when you're listening to this, about specifically PoAMs, and how to create them and how you can get them. But you also be careful if your prime contractor is asking for your CMMC Level 2 certification PoAM. If they're asking for that, there's a different. Oh, hold on. You just brought up another type of PoAM. Have we just opened the door for you? Because you can receive a PoAM if you get the minimum score while doing a CMMC Level 2 certification through a C3PAO. You can receive a PoAM. Now, you have to go through a lot of hoops to actually get a PoAM. It's actually beautiful and incredible that you've received a PoAM because you've passed a
If
certain.
anyone's literally gotten a conditional level 2, please make a comment. You are a unicorn. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
chance,
good
that's
job.
like the trifecta. The chance that you fail only those specific controls that you're allowed to create a PoAM,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not many.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
It can't be 5 pointers. It can't be three
right,
pointers. There's certain specific controls that they even call out that you can't hit. There's
right.
a level of requirements which in the podcast that we're creating about that, we'll dive more into that. Um,
It's like falling out of a 3-story building and you have to break only your right toe.
it's incredibly impressive. Yeah.
You're like, that's the only thing you broke. You're like, yeah, okay.
But
You know,
but if they're saying that to you, then they're assuming that you've already done your certification, like you've already done your assessment, and you're in conditional, and you're in the middle of the 180-day window that you have to complete this PoAM to be switched from conditional to a full CMMC Level 2
right.
certification.
But
That's
you're,
way farther down the line.
but once 32 CFR came out, they're like, nope, poems have to be closed out completely in 180 days.
Mm-hmm.
So then they've kind of defined that. So,
Mm-hmm.
but what the contractors are really looking for is organizations that have been using PoAMs the old way and they've been stretching it out for 10 or 20 years and they haven't really moved the needle. They're looking for those organizations that have been basically fraudulent in their approach of how they've been trying to do it because they just want to run their business and they don't have time to worry about security. Okay. So that's the reality of what they're trying to do. And so they're just trying to ask some very intelligent questions to see. So the reality is you need to get an outside organization that knows what they're doing. How they would suggest getting a C3PO to do it because they've gone through it. Some people are like, no, it should be an RP. DM me, bro. We'll talk. But let me just tell you, it's a C3PO if you want to be smart about it. Now, there are plenty of RPs that I know personally, good friends of mine, and they know what the heck they're doing. But it is a small percentage of people that have had a lot of experience that
They're
are
also
fall
a
into that category.
CCP. They're also a CCA. Those are
Yeah, yeah.
so.
I mean, those are, but you want to find people that have sat through audits that have gone through it. I don't care what initial you got behind it. If you've literally sat through these audits and have lived it and breathed it, those are the people you want to talk to, no matter what initials they have behind their names,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can really understand and they can appropriately evaluate where you're at so you can get a real good score. And then you can think about, okay, how do I move the needle? That's a whole other challenge. But they want to see a realistic PoAM that has real data that's got good actionable information about how you've been moving it. That's
Yes,
really what they're looking at.
absolutely. Yeah. Now, the last question that I want to address, this is a more pointed question, but I really loved it, and I think many people have thought about it, and so I wanted to bring it up in this podcast episode, which is NIST 800-171 Rev 3. So for those of you guys who aren't aware, Rev 2 is what 32 CFR is based upon. And so Rev 3 came out after 32 CFR was published. So people have asked me how that affects the rollout of CMMC. And I think, specifically they're asking, well, wouldn't they pause, wouldn't they pause 32 CFR in the rollout of that because they need to update it to Rev 3 versus it being the old Rev 2. So, Bobby, do you want to speak to your perspective about that
Ooh,
too
that's a
before
lot
what
to
I say?
unpack. I will keep this as concise as possible. You would think that seems to make a lot of logical sense that you'd want to do that, but kind of the DoD's like, look, we've been we've been at this so long, we ain't got time to bleed, just to steal from Predator there. The good movie, look it up if you haven't ever seen it. But it is basically they don't have time for that, and so they just put out a class deviation that said we'll fix it in post, kind of like we'll just slap some CGI on it and move on. And we want to get this thing rolled out, and so they're rolling out version 2. So if you look, strangely enough, if you look and download what version is currently being implemented, it's version 2, and you go look and it's got all over it, this is not the right way, the right document that's valid. This is not the current version. It's all over it written.
Yeah,
And
yes.
you're like, is this okay? Yeah, actually it is. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Now, for organizations, you really want to start thinking about how you're going to want to try to implement the controls. You can implement the controls in Rev 3 in a way that doesn't conflict with how you're doing it in Rev 2. The challenge is you have to be able to speak authoritatively about how you did everything in Rev 2. And that's where the challenge in your audit goes, is you want to make sure that you can have a system security plan that appropriately addresses everything in the 320 assessment objectives. And if you're smart about it, you want to think about how you're trying to future-proof for those types of things in the future. And there are some differences, quite a few actually, in Rev 3. But short answer is they're not going to hold back. They're moving forward. It's screw it, full speed ahead is kind of the DoD's approach on this.
Yep. Couldn't have said
And
it better
they
myself.
have just, spoiler alert, they've released what the definitions for the variables. So if you happen to look at Rev 3, they have these things called organizationally defined parameters. And the DoD just recently released what those are supposed to be. So they kind of went in and did the Mad Libs CMMC and filled it all in. And here's what the lockout time is supposed to be. Here's what this is supposed to be, because those were allowed to be defined by the organization. The DoD kicked the door in and said, nope, it's our way now. This is how it's going to be. And so now you don't have that flexibility. They're defining it in Rev 3 about how those are going to be.
Right.
And I think that they did it very fast. And I think that sent a very clear message to organizations that they're not messing around with how fast they want to start rolling out Rev 3 in the future. So when they're going to say it's actually going to start getting kicked in, I think is going to be determined by how they see the rollout this year starting to happen. If they're seeing progress, what they're looking for, then they might go ahead and start pushing forward with doing it sooner. But if it's like a train wreck dumpster fire, I have a feeling they'll probably hold off on trying to push Rev 3 down everybody's throat just because they don't want to, totally set the whole building on fire. But we'll see.
Yeah. I do want to emphasize, too, as we're coming to a close with this, that there are many people that I have talked to, and this isn't necessarily a question, it's just a statement that they make, that these contractors are waiting because they've heard that it'll take about, 8 months to a year for their system to get prepared. So they're waiting for that time to hit where they can perfectly get about 8 months to a year until they'll need their CMMC Level 2 certification. I just want to clarify that people fail a CMMC Level 2 assessment. Okay?
All the time.
All the time. I have talked to multiple of these people. I have talked to assessors who have failed people. I've talked to assessors who have false started people, so they didn't even make it past phase 1. Please do not wait until it's like a buzzer beater sort of thing, because what if you don't get it perfect? What if you get a PoAM and you have 180 days to fix that too? What if you fail and you have to redefine your scope and come back to the assessor? Do you have enough time for that? Okay, so now it's me flipping and I'm asking the question, do you have enough time for that? That's kind of cool.
Well, it's kind of like it's your wedding day and you finally try on your tux. And guess
Ooh,
what? it doesn't fit. And you're like, crap.
Yeah.
You're like, I guess I'm going to walk in the wedding with some high waters, and there's not a whole lot I can do about it.
Hear me out.
You
Hear
know?
me out. It's like you know that your tux doesn't fit, but you're going to start working out 6 months before the wedding to lose 110 pounds, right?
Right.
Do
Wow.
you want to guarantee that you'll only need 6 months to lose that weight to fit into that tux? Or should you just prepare a little bit sooner for losing that 110 pounds,
Yeah. No kidding.
right?
Yeah.
So,
It's just when you try to thread the needle like that, life happens, people. Like,
yeah.
so you need to count on that. So
Hmm.
don't sit here and go, oh, I don't know. Like, you should be going now. Don't wait.
Hmm.
Don't do that. Go
Hmm.
for it now. Give yourself the extra grace and time frame, because rolling out CMMC change control, just normalizing it in your environment. I mean, I could roll out CMMC in an organization in 3 months. It takes probably 6 months for the organization to normalize what the heck just happened to them,
Yep.
because they're like, wait, you mean I have to approve? Oh, I can't do it this way? What? I don't have, huh? And they don't. It is a big punch in the face as far as an operationally how they work from a daily basis around things that they're just used to being able to do. I can just go down and to Walmart and grab a printer and plug it in, right? Well, you print CUIs. No, that like you can't just plug in a printer whenever you want. You can't just install an app the way that you want to, like
Hmm.
you used to do it. These things are different now, and you've got to think about that
Right.
in your operational process. So it's just normalizing it in your business
Hmm.
takes time, and it's not a dollar amount that you can throw at it that just solves the problem. Your people have to get used to it. You don't go to someone and say, "Hey, I'm just going to pay you money, and I want to walk a tight wire across the Niagara," and
Some
you're
people
like,
might take that though.
"Yeah," and they're like,
We've
"I
heard.
can do that." But in their mind, they just wrote the check, and I'm across already. Like, no, you're gonna have to train and figure out how to do it, and I'll help you, and we'll set up the wire, and we'll make it super safe as possible. But you're still gonna have to walk it, and you're still gonna have to have the practice and time to spend to do it. And so normalizing that in your operation is the biggest thing that people just greatly underestimate,
Yeah.
and that's the challenge. And they also don't think about it when they hire someone
So
to
true.
help them through the guided process. So,
Yeah, so true. Well, guys, I hope this was beneficial to either, contractors who are asking some of these questions that we've talked about, or MSPs that are listening to this that are directing their contractor client through the CMMC journey. We're here for more questions. If you have them, you
yeah,
can put them in the comments,
hit us
or
with them. I want to hear
yeah,
them.
message us, whatever. And we'll be willing to, and if we have enough of them, maybe we'll make another. We'll make part two for even more questions, which would be
Can't wait.
awesome. So, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, but also thanks for listening to season 3, because this is
Yeah.
the end. Stay tuned. In 2 weeks, we should be kicking off season 4. I'm
Mhm.
really, really excited because we've got some new episodes of Cyber even being released in season 4, which has to do with some people who have taken their whole company through a CMMC Level 2 assessment and passed as a contractor.
That's
Woo!
astounding. I
So
cannot
fun.
wait to hear that one. And that's what
Can't
that I'm so looking forward to hearing that. I'm
yeah.
tempted to be in the green room just to help do
No, get out.
producing.
It's Cyber. Get out. Sorry about that, guys. He'll leave. He won't be there. Don't worry. Yes. So there's going to be some really cool episodes. Like I was talking about, episode about PoAM specifically, and filling those out and writing those out and what they look like. So I'm really excited for
We're
those.
going to be doing a pro series where we go into a lot more depth of a lot of things. We're going to be
Mm-hmm.
actually answering much more. I think I saw a Reddit comment. Someone said, they spend a lot of time talking about their level 2. Well, it freaking took a long time to get it. So yeah, sorry. But we are going to speak
We're
more
on Reddit.
time.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. We're
Sick.
also going to speak more time about like how you do some of these technical pieces. We're going to even try to get more specific and try to answer different things about system security plans and ways that you
Yes.
can write those and how they can
Yeah.
look. We'll talk a lot more about policies and the connections of how you can do those things, and just a
Yeah.
lot more detail to try to help people just in the weeds get more guidance and insight.
Yeah, also, rude, don't crap on our CMMC Level 2 assessment. You're lucky that we didn't create a shirt that just said, we passed our CMMC Level 2 assessment, and that's all it said, you know?
That's all it said.
And if we do make a shirt, let's send it to the person that commented that on Reddit. Rude. All right. Well, guys, thank you again for listening to Season 3 in this episode, and stay tuned in 2 weeks for Season 4. But until then, keep on climbing. See you guys. Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay up to date on the latest CMMC news. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and listen out for the next one. But until then, keep on climbing.